Let's talk about something raw, something real. You've been there, waiting for a message that never comes, scanning their stories like a detective, rehearsing closure speeches in your head you'll never get to deliver, and yet, somehow, they come back. Just when your eyes stop darting to your phone, just when your heart beats without their shadow in it, they return, not out of love, at least not the kind you deserved, but because something has changed, and that something is you. Here's the truth no one told you, the shift that unlocks everything. People don't miss you when you're available. They miss you when you're gone. But let's not rush, because this isn't just another relationship rant. This is about taking your power back, not through revenge, not through pretense, but through presence. This is Stoicism in action. This is about building a kind of strength they can feel in your silence. The kind of peace that speaks louder than your old desperation ever could. We've been conditioned to believe the louder we care, the more they'll stay. But what if that belief is the very thing that keeps you stuck? What if all your effort is the comfort that enables their distance? You see, the problem isn't that you loved too deeply. It's that you kept loving in their absence. The common advice says, stay soft, stay open, be patient. But let me ask you this, how long do you wait for someone who stopped choosing you? If you've ever asked yourself, do they even care I'm gone? Or why do they reach out just when I've moved on? This message is for you, because what you're about to discover isn't just about love, it's about identity, about emotional gravity, about becoming so rooted in your peace that they lose their orbit around your energy. This is the transformation they didn't see coming. The day you stop needing them is the day they start needing you, but not because you played a game, because you stopped playing theirs. I'm going to walk you through the uncomfortable truths. Yes, some of them will sting, but they will also awaken. We'll tear down the illusions, the romanticized pain, and reveal something far more potent, your rebirth. If you want stoic relationships built not on chasing but on clarity, not on games but on grounded presence, then stay with me. Because once we begin this, you won't want to go back. Not to them and not to the version of yourself who waited. And here's the thing, what I'll share with you isn't just advice, it's a mirror. One that reflects both the pain you've survived and the strength you've been suppressing. This is for the ones who cared too much, who gave too freely, who loved without holding back. And now, it's your turn to receive what you never asked for, your own peace, your own power, your own closure. Don't blink, don't scroll away, because the part that's coming next, that's the part that breaks their control and births your freedom. 1. The illusion of control. You think you're holding on because you care, because you believe there's still something to salvage, because letting go feels like failure, like quitting. But what if the very act of holding on is what's keeping you in pain? What if every message you didn't send but thought about, every story you watched but didn't like, every memory you romanticized was just fuel for a fire that's been consuming your own identity? That's the trap of control, the illusion that if you just say the right thing, wait the right amount of time, show up one more time with just enough softness and hope, they'll finally see your worth. But has it ever worked? Have they ever stayed because you waited longer, or because you explained more clearly, or because you dimmed your truth to make their comfort more bearable? The answer, buried beneath your bravest hopes, is no. And yet, we stay, we orbit them emotionally like satellites around a planet that doesn't even acknowledge our presence anymore. We check their online status like it's a pulse, like their availability determines our value. But it doesn't. What determines your value is your ability to choose silence when chaos calls your name. What makes you powerful is not how much you can tolerate, but how much you refuse to tolerate for the sake of your soul. They don't stay because you're available. They stay when they feel your absence like a wound. That's not manipulation. It's Stoicism. It's the removal of emotional chaos from your decisions. And the longer you perform availability, hoping to earn permanence, the more you teach them that your presence is automatic, not sacred. They return your texts when they want to feel desired, not when they're ready to desire you wholly. They come close when their own silence becomes unbearable, not because they've realized what they lost, but because they want to see if you're still lost without them. And if you are, the power remains theirs. Stoic relationships don't operate on emotional hunger. They exist in clarity, presence, self-honor. But as long as your identity is wrapped up in their attention, you will dance for crumbs and call it love. Have you ever asked why they disappear when you're most vulnerable and return when you've begun healing? It's not random. It's because they feel the shift. Your energy detaches, your soul stops leaking into theirs. And suddenly, your absence speaks louder than your explanations ever did. But you will only reach that point once you break the addiction to control, because that's all it is. Emotional control masquerading as hope. Control says, if I just wait longer, they'll get it. Control says, if I just become better, more patient, more understanding, they'll stay. But Stoicism says, if I lose myself to gain them, I've lost everything. Let me ask you, when did love become a performance? When did care turn into calculation? When did checking in with someone become checking out of yourself? You were taught that giving is noble, but they never told you that over-giving without reciprocity is just self-betrayal dressed in virtue. They don't respect your silence when it's rooted in waiting. They respect your silence when it's rooted in sovereignty. Have you ever stopped to think how much they expect you to remain emotionally available even when they're physically gone? They leave, yet they assume you'll still wonder, still worry, still wait. That's not connection. That's entitlement. You are not a heartbeat for someone who doesn't know how to breathe beside you. You are not a therapist for someone who won't own their chaos. And you are not a lighthouse for someone who keeps choosing storms. Every time you double text, every time you scroll their feed with quiet desperation, every time you romanticize what hurt you, you reinforce the lie that your presence is infinite. But your presence is sacred. It's not a gift for the ungrateful. It's a force for the grounded. That illusion of control tells you that consistency will earn you closeness. But in Stoicism, we know that control is a prison made of fear. And fear will never give you freedom. So what are you really afraid of? That they'll forget you, or that without them you'll forget yourself? Because if you're still chasing them through thoughts, through behaviors, through indirect posts, and spiritual what-ifs, then you haven't truly let go. You've only paused your performance. They feel it, you know. The second you stop giving, they feel the void, and that void rattles them more than your presence ever did. But they must feel it. They must feel the cost of losing you. Otherwise, they'll never understand the value you brought. And here's what they never tell you. Value is never proven through pursuit. It's felt through absence. Stoic relationships honor that space. They don't manipulate it. So, let go of the fantasy that your control will create change. Release the notion that your suffering will birth clarity in them. It won't. They only return when you've detached, when your hands stop reaching, when your energy pulls inward, when your soul stops broadcasting signals hoping to be heard. That's when the shift happens. That's when the power flips. But only if you stop performing, only if you realize that the version of you who begs for love is not the version who receives it. So I ask again, what if letting go doesn't mean losing them, but finally returning to yourself? 2. The power of emotional detachment. They say absence makes the heart grow fonder, but they rarely explain why. They rarely show you how detachment doesn't mean indifference. It means strength. It means the ability to reclaim the energy you once leaked, the presence you once gave away so freely, the love you poured like an open faucet into someone who never brought a container. Detachment Real detachment is not cold, it's calm, it's clarity, it's walking away with both hands open, not clenched fists or unfinished texts. It's the stillness after the storm, the silence that no longer hopes to be filled. You don't detach to make them miss you. You detach because you're done missing yourself. But here's the catch: emotional detachment only works when it's real. Not a performance, not a delay tactic, not a test, because they can feel the difference. They know when your silence is bait and when it's peace, when your absence is a cry for attention versus a statement of self-worth. Most people don't panic because you're gone. They panic because they realize they can no longer access you emotionally, and that's when the unraveling begins. They were used to you responding, even if late. They were used to your views on their stories, your quiet digital presence lingering like perfume in an empty room. But the moment your energy disappears completely, they lose their map. And nothing frightens someone who's relied on your attention like not knowing how to get it back. Stoicism teaches us this discipline, not to manipulate others, but to master ourselves, to realize that presence is not owed to those who mishandle it, that silence is not punishment, it's a boundary, that detachment is not withdrawal, it's evolution. But here's the truth that stings before it heals. You were emotionally accessible long after you physically walked away. You told yourself you let go, but you were still orbiting. You were still decoding texts that never came, still attaching meaning to their digital breadcrumbs. You were still hoping, still hurting, still half open like a door waiting for someone to push through. But emotional detachment begins when you stop needing closure to close, when you stop waiting for them to notice your worth and start walking like you already know it. They return, yes, but only when your energy stops reaching, only when your mind stops replaying, only when your heart finally says no more. And let me be clear, this isn't about giving up on love. This is about giving up the illusion that love must cost you your peace, that someone else must validate your depth for it to matter. It doesn't. Your emotional detachment isn't about silence, it's about signal. You're no longer broadcasting availability to people who never tuned in with intention. That shift, it's not loud, but it's powerful. It's the moment you stop being an emotional mirror for someone who only looks into you when they feel lost. And suddenly, the air gets still. You're not reacting, not explaining, not waiting. You're just being. And that beingness, that anchored calm, becomes their storm. Because what they fed on wasn't just your presence, it was your predictability. And when that's gone, so is their confidence. Let's be honest, they don't always come back because they love you. Sometimes they come back because they miss being the center of your emotional weather. They miss being able to trigger a response, spark a thought, occupy your mind. And now you're unreadable, you're unbothered. And that terrifies them more than your tears ever did. But you earned that silence, you earned that stillness. Not because you stopped caring, but because you started caring about the right person, yourself. Emotional detachment is a return, not a retreat. It's the moment you choose to no longer be consumed by someone who was never ready to hold what you offered. You don't owe them an explanation. You don't owe them a final message. What you owe is to the version of you who cried, who waited, who doubted their worth. That version deserves your loyalty now. So when they reach out, when they test the waters with vague messages and late-night nostalgia, ask yourself, am I detached? Or am I delaying pain? Because pain delayed is not pain escaped, it's pain prolonged. And you are not here to prolong your suffering in the name of romance. You are here to choose your peace so loudly that their noise fades into irrelevance. And don't be surprised when they return, because they always return. The only question is, will they find the same version of you waiting, or will they find someone who no longer needs to be found? If you've made it this far, and something inside you resonates with this truth, let that part speak. Don't ignore it, don't bury it. This is your season to stop explaining and start evolving, to stop performing love and start embodying it. That's Stoicism in real life. That's what Stoic relationships are built on. Not desperation, not hope, but grounded truth. And if this video reached that part of you that's tired of repeating emotional loops, if you feel the shift rising within you right now, then honor it. Hit that like button and comment number 1 below if you feel this is your moment, if you're done leaking energy to the wrong people, and if you're ready to keep growing, to keep rising, to build Stoic relationships rooted in clarity, calm, and deep presence, then subscribe. Not just for more content, but to mark the moment you chose peace over pursuit. Let's keep building together. 3. When silence becomes louder than words. There comes a moment in every broken connection when words no longer carry weight, when explanations are nothing more than echoes in a space where listening has died, and all that remains is the unmistakable power of silence. At first, you may have used your words like lifelines, pleading, justifying, over-explaining, hoping that if you spoke just clearly enough, they'd finally understand your heart. But words cannot rescue someone who has stopped receiving. They cannot change someone who benefits from your confusion. You learn, often the hard way, that silence is not weakness. Silence is a roar, a soundless, seismic shift in power that doesn't demand attention yet commands it all the same. When you go quiet, not because you're sulking or strategizing, but because you've finally seen the futility of your efforts, something extraordinary happens. The dynamic flips. Your absence becomes louder than any message you could send. The quiet becomes a mirror they never expected to face. Because when you spoke, even when you begged or explained or reasoned, they still had control. They could respond or ignore. They could twist your vulnerability into guilt. But when you stop speaking, when your emotional line goes dead, they lose access. And nothing terrifies someone used to your availability like the realization that they are no longer part of your internal monologue. Stoicism teaches us that virtue lives in action, not reaction. That serenity is found not in what we say, but in what we no longer need to say. When your silence is born from healing, not bitterness, not games, it becomes a message they cannot misinterpret, because it is not about them anymore. It is about you reclaiming space, energy, breath. There is no tone to twist, no words to manipulate, just the clarity of your absence. And that, my friend, is when the storm begins, for them, because silence, unlike sound, creates uncertainty, and uncertainty breeds discomfort. You were once their emotional certainty, always there, always reacting, always caring, but now you are an unknown. They don't know what you're thinking, where your heart stands, whether you've moved on, whether they've been replaced, whether you care at all. And the irony? That silence they feared was the same space they once took. For granted, they ignored your presence until it vanished. They didn't value your voice until it stopped calling their name. Now the quiet echoes, now it taunts, and every moment they hesitate to reach out is a moment they realize they no longer hold the strings. But be warned, this is the part where many falter. This is where the temptation to speak again creeps in, because silence, while powerful, is also uncomfortable. Especially when you've been conditioned to believe that love is loud, that care is constant, that presence is proof. But Stoic relationships are not built on noise. They are founded in stillness, in unwavering self-respect. Silence, when held with intention, becomes a sanctuary. It becomes a reset, a recalibration of emotional priorities. You begin to hear your own thoughts again. You remember who you are outside of their orbit. You rediscover the rhythm of your soul, the one that was drowned out by the chaos of needing to be understood by someone who never really listened. And they feel it, Oh, they feel it, not because you intended for them to, but because that's the natural consequence of removing yourself from the game. They start checking your stories like you used to check theirs. They craft messages and delete them. They ask mutual friends about you. They show up subtly, hoping you'll break the silence first, but you don't. Not because you're trying to win, because you've already won. You've returned to yourself. You've stepped out of the emotional tug-of-war, and now you're standing still while they pull at a rope with no resistance. That stillness, it's louder than any argument, any heartfelt letter, any apology you once begged for. And what's more, it's unshakable, because it's not a tactic, it's a truth rooted in Stoicism, where peace is not found in their return, but in your release. Do they think about you? Yes, but not the way you once thought they would. They don't think about your words. They think about your quiet. They don't miss your messages. They miss the feeling of being important. They miss the certainty of your care. And the longer you remain silent, the more their imagination fills in the blanks. Who are you with now? What are you doing? Have you outgrown them? These questions, once yours, are now theirs. The power has shifted, not out of revenge, but out of renewal. And yet, silence also brings revelation. It reveals who checks in only when you reach out, who vanishes when you stop feeding the connection, who valued you versus who valued your access. You begin to see people as they are, not as they presented themselves to be. And in that clarity, you start closing chapters, not with bitterness, but with blessings. You realize that not every silence needs to be filled, that some stories find their resolution not in dialogue but in departure. And the most powerful thing, when they finally reach out, it won't hit the same. Their message, once a trigger of hope or anxiety, now feels foreign, because you're no longer starving for their attention. You're full on your own energy. They speak, but your silence has already said enough. It told them that you're not waiting, that you're not stuck, that you've outgrown the conversation entirely. And the irony is sharp. They had your attention when they didn't respect it. Now that they want it, they have to earn it. And many won't even try, because the version of you they knew, the one who always replied, always hoped, always showed up, is gone. You didn't leave with noise. You didn't slam the door. You simply stopped opening it. And now the silence stands like a monument, not to your pain, but to your power. Because the loudest truths are the ones we no longer feel. The need to say, you've stepped into that truth. You're living it. And in this stillness, you're not just healing, you're becoming untouchable. 4. The return driven by ego, not love. There's a bitter truth most people don't want to face because it shatters the last thread of romantic fantasy they're clinging to. When they come back, it's not always love calling them, it's ego. They don't miss you because they suddenly realized how deeply they cared, how much they messed up, or how your soul is irreplaceable. No, they come back because something feels missing inside them. And they remember that you used to fill it, but that something isn't you. It's the power they felt when they knew they mattered to you. Let's be real, many of them didn't appreciate your love when it was pouring out, unconditional and consistent. They didn't feel blessed to be held in your orbit. They felt entitled. They expected your energy to flow like a river they never had to maintain. They took and took, thinking you'd never stop giving, but you did. And in that absence, they didn't suddenly evolve. They didn't become new people overnight. What they felt was withdrawal. Withdrawal from being the center of your emotional world. Withdrawal from the high they got every time your attention confirmed their worth. And now, they're not reaching out because they're ready to reciprocate. They're reaching out to see if they still can. They want to know if the door is still cracked open, if they say the right thing, if they drop a subtle, "I've been thinking about you," or a harmless meme or a casual, "Hey, stranger," will your heart leap again? That's what they're testing, not love, but access. And here's what hurts. They may not even be aware that it's ego. That's what makes it so confusing. They convince themselves they miss you, but what they're really missing is how you made them feel about themselves. The applause, the comfort, the emotional devotion they could drink from without ever pouring back. And this is where Stoicism becomes essential, because without it, you'll confuse their return with redemption. You'll hear, "I miss you," and think it means, "I've changed." But change is not in the words. It's in the patterns. It's in how they show up differently, consistently, not just when their loneliness screams louder than their pride. They return not because they're ready to love, but because your silence has created discomfort. They don't know who you are anymore, and that unfamiliarity creates insecurity. You used to be predictable, emotionally open, reactive. Now you're unreadable. You're calm. You've become a mirror they don't recognize, and it rattles them. They start to wonder, do they still care? Have I been replaced? How could they move on so fast? But they're not worried about you. They're worried about how they've lost control over the narrative, over their place in your story. They thought they could take a break from you and return to the same version they left. But Stoic relationships don't operate on emotional pause. When you step away, it's a decision, not a tactic. You didn't disappear to teach them a lesson. You vanished because you finally learned yours. That love without respect is not love. It's emotional labor. That connection without effort is not intimacy. It's convenience. And now that you've stopped chasing, they feel the weight of their own absence. But don't be fooled. They won't come back with accountability. They'll come back with curiosity. They won't say, "I'm sorry for wasting your love." They'll say, "I miss what we had." They won't say, "You deserved more than I gave." They'll say, "Things just got complicated," and it will sound sincere. It will echo all the old tones you wanted to hear. But listen closely. Are they speaking from clarity or from confusion? Are they returning to build something or just to feel something? Because ego doesn't seek growth, it seeks comfort. And if they haven't done the inner work, if they haven't faced the silence the way you have, if they haven't rebuilt themselves in your absence, then what they want isn't connection, it's confirmation. They want to feel seen again. They want the version of you who used to light up at their crumbs, not the one who's now dining at a full table of self-worth. And here's where your power lives. In not falling for it, in recognizing the difference between a knock at the door and someone who's ready to stay, because you're no longer the person who waits for love to mature in the hands of someone who dropped it. You're not here to be someone's emotional fuel station, to refill their confidence while they give you nothing but uncertainty. You've evolved beyond that. You've begun building a life that isn't paused for anyone's indecision. You've stopped defining your value by who returns and started measuring your peace by who no longer has access. And when they realize that, when they feel your absence as permanent, not performative, that's when their ego gets bruised. That's when they panic. But don't confuse panic with progress. Don't mistake their emotional discomfort for emotional growth. One is a reaction, the other is a transformation. And if they haven't transformed, you don't owe them access to the new you. Not everyone deserves a second chance just because they came back. Some people need to realize they lost something irreplaceable, not because you vanished, but because you became unavailable in all the ways they once exploited. That's what Stoicism teaches us. That dignity is not in revenge, it's in restraint. That true healing is not proving them wrong, it's proving yourself right. So when the message comes, when the "I've been thinking about you" shows up in your inbox, take a breath. Listen not with your heart, but with your clarity. Ask yourself, does this message serve my peace or disturb it? Is this a reunion or a rerun? And if you feel even a sliver of doubt, honor that. Because peace isn't loud, but it is firm. And the strongest signal that you've grown is that you don't need their return to feel whole anymore. You are not the same. And they don't know what to do with that, but you do. You walk forward, you keep rising, you choose yourself again. And if this message found the part of you that needed that reminder today, if this truth echoed something sacred and silent in your heart, then don't let it stay in your head. Like this video and comment number 1 if this chapter is yours. And subscribe if you're ready to build with clarity, not chaos, because Stoic relationships are waiting for you. Not in the past, but ahead. Let's keep going. You're not done yet. 5. Letting go is liberation, not loss. Letting go is one of those phrases people throw around like confetti, like it's easy, like it's obvious, like it's just a matter of flipping an emotional switch and walking away with a clean heart and a clear mind. But anyone who's ever truly loved and lost knows that letting go is less like a choice and more like a death, a gradual gut-wrenching unraveling of everything you believed, hoped, and built inside your chest. And yet, it is also the only doorway to freedom, the only path back to yourself. Because what you're really releasing isn't just them, it's the version of you that clung, that stayed too long, that bent backwards in rooms that didn't have space for your full height, and the lie they fed you, the one so many of us drink like it's sacred truth, is that to let go means to give up, to fail, to abandon. But that's not liberation talking, that's guilt. That's fear disguised as devotion. And the truth is that staying in love with someone who no longer shows up is the real abandonment, the abandonment of self, of worth, of peace. And when you let go, truly let go, without announcements, without emotional press releases, without performative closure, something miraculous happens. You begin to breathe again. Not shallow, anxious gasps for meaning in their absence, but deep-rooted inhales of your own presence, your own clarity, your own damn power. And it won't feel good at first. In fact, it might feel like losing a limb, because when we've built our identity around someone else's presence, detaching feels like disintegration. But Stoicism reminds us that the highest good is not in attachment to what is fleeting, but in aligning with what is eternal within us. And what is eternal is not their affection, not their attention, not even the memories you once worshipped. It is your ability to choose what serves your highest peace, your deepest clarity, your most whole expression, and too often we confuse the memory of connection with the reality of commitment. We keep watering dead gardens, blaming ourselves for the lack of bloom. But no amount of love can root someone who was never planted in the same soil. And you must ask yourself, are you holding on to them, or to the hope that the story will redeem itself, that the ending will justify the heartbreak, that they'll become the person you imagined they were in your most forgiving moments? But people don't always grow in your absence. They grow if they choose to, and if they haven't, then your letting go isn't a loss. It's a boundary. It's a declaration that you will no longer bleed for someone who only noticed you when you were hemorrhaging, and yes, you will miss them. Not them, the human, necessarily, but the idea of them, the version you carried in your mind, the fantasy of who they could have been if they had only seen you fully, loved you deeply, stayed consistently. And it is okay to grieve that. It is human to ache for what could have been. But Stoic relationships are not built on potential. They are built on presence, on what is real, what is grounded, what shows up and stays and chooses you with eyes wide open and hands not just willing but ready to hold. And as you release the grip, as you let the emotional knots unravel, you may fear that they'll forget you, that they'll move on first, that you'll be replaced. But let me ask you, what exactly are you afraid of losing if what you're clinging to is already gone? Because staying in a space where your love is conditional, where your peace is constantly bargained, where your worth is a negotiation table, this is not love. This is emotional survival, and it is not your job to survive for someone else. It is your sacred task to thrive for yourself, and the world will tell you otherwise, will romanticize suffering, glorify staying. But true growth requires disruption, true healing requires detachment, and the path to emotional sovereignty requires you to turn inward, to stop asking, "Why didn't they choose me?" and start asking, "Why? Did I wait for someone who didn't?" Because when you let go, truly and without resistance, you begin to see them clearly, not the curated highlight reel, not the nostalgic filter, but the reality. Someone who didn't meet you in your depth. Someone who wasn't ready to build. Someone who mistook your availability for weakness and your forgiveness for foolishness. But you are not foolish. You are human, and the heart is a loyal beast. It keeps pounding even when it's bruised. But now, it's time to teach it a new rhythm, one that beats not for someone else's recognition, but for your own reclamation. And yes, the nights will be hard. The silence will scream. The memories will haunt. But not everything that haunts you is meant to be resurrected. And not everything that feels familiar is good for your future. You must understand that your past is not a prophecy, and your healing does not require their apology. And if you're still waiting for a final word, a last text, an honest moment, let this be it. You don't need their explanation to move forward. You don't need their permission to heal. You don't need their return to feel validated, because you are already whole in your own solitude, and letting go isn't erasure. It's evolution. It's saying, "This love taught me, hurt me, grew me, and now I choose to release it with honor, not with hate." And that release, it is sacred, it is transformative, it is stoic, because it is the highest act of self-respect. And once you do it, once you finally stop clinging, you'll feel it. The peace, the quiet, the power that was buried under your grief, and you'll realize they were never your closure, you were, and you'll stop waiting to be seen and start seeing yourself. And that, my friend, is not loss, that is liberation. 6. Rebuilding without them is the real triumph. At first, rebuilding feels like wandering, like waking up in a world that looks the same but doesn't feel familiar anymore, a world that once revolved around them but now rotates in silence, and you, standing in the debris of what was, are forced to ask a terrifying question: who am I without them? It's a question that echoes in the quiet moments, in the spaces where their voice used to live, where their name once carried weight. And for a while, the answer doesn't come easily, because your identity has been wrapped in shared memories, in roles you played to keep them comfortable, in pieces of yourself you silenced just to keep the peace. But as time passes, and it does, no matter how frozen your heart feels, you begin to find new answers, not all at once, not loudly, but in subtle shifts. In the way you start to move through your day without thinking of their presence, in the way your energy returns to you like a tide you forgot how to summon, and you realize the healing isn't something you perform for anyone. It's something you do quietly, relentlessly, like placing bricks in the foundation of a home. No one else gets to design this time. And here's the twist you didn't expect. You're not rebuilding for revenge. You're not trying to make them regret. You're not rising so they'll see your glow. You're doing it because survival demanded it, because staying broken wasn't sustainable, because eventually the weight of waiting for someone who never came back became too heavy to carry. And so you dropped it, not with anger, but with clarity. And that was the first brick. The moment you stopped making excuses for their absence and started making space for your own presence. And then came the second brick, the late night where you cried, not because you missed them, but because you finally admitted you missed yourself, the version of you that laughed without caution, that loved without fear, that lived without asking for permission. And the third brick, that was when you stopped checking their stories, stopped wondering if they were watching yours, stopped feeding the illusion that their attention was a prize to be won, and instead you turned inward, not out of bitterness, but because your energy deserved better real estate than the empty halls of their inconsistency. And that's when the true rebuilding begins, not in the gym selfies or the rebound texts or the public declarations of being over it, but in the quiet discipline of choosing yourself again and again, even when it's lonely, even when it's hard, even when the ghost of their voice whispers, "What if?" and your body wants to respond, but your soul says no more. And let me be clear, this process is not linear. You will relapse. You will remember the good times and wonder if you overreacted. You will feel the tug of nostalgia, and it will lie to you. It will dress up pain as poetry and try to seduce you back into the arms of your own undoing. But that's when Stoicism must anchor you. That's when you remind yourself that real strength is not in returning to what broke you, but in staying rooted in the new ground you're building, because that ground, it's yours now, not shared, not borrowed, not held up by conditional affection. And the more you build, the clearer your vision becomes. You begin to see that what you lost was not a soulmate, but a story. A story you told yourself to make sense of why you stayed so long in a place that didn't nurture you. And when you tell the truth, when you admit they were never coming back the way you hoped, they lose their hold on your narrative, and you become the author again, writing chapters with new boundaries, new standards, new peace. And you no longer crave closure from them because you've created it with your own hands, your own tears, your own rituals of self-respect. And here's the most powerful part. They feel it. They notice. Not because you posted it, but because your energy is no longer feeding them, because their name no longer controls your heartbeat, because they are now a visitor in a world they used to dominate. And when they do come back, as they often do, they will not find the person who used to bend. They will find someone who built a new house. And they will stand outside the gates of your growth, unsure if they're even welcome. And that uncertainty, that silence from you, is the real triumph, not because you're punishing them, but because you're protecting yourself. Because you finally understand that love without reciprocity is just emotional labor unpaid. And you've stopped working for free. And if you've been rebuilding, if you're still in the early stages, and it feels like no one sees your effort, let me tell you now, I see you, and more importantly, you are seeing you, and that is the only validation that ever truly mattered. So keep stacking the bricks, keep walking the unfamiliar road. Keep choosing discomfort over dysfunction, and one day you will look in the mirror and not see pain. You will see peace, not performance, not a mask, but a face that glows with the quiet dignity of someone who reclaimed themselves. And if this message reached you in that space, if this is the chapter where you rise not for them, but for you, then honor it, click like and comment #1 if this resonated, and subscribe if you're building something bigger than the heartbreak. If you're choosing a path lit by your own fire, because Stoic relationships aren't found by looking back, they're built by walking forward, eyes open, heart steady, soul aligned, and you, my friend, are on that path right now. And now we arrive, not at the end, but at the beginning of something entirely new. Because what you've just walked through, what you've chosen to confront, is more than heartbreak. It's transformation. You've peeled back the illusions, torn through the lies of conditional love, and stood bare in front of your own reflection, long enough to recognize what was always there. Strength. But not the kind of strength that shouts or performs. No, this is the quiet, grounded strength that is born only through suffering, that doesn't break you, but refines you. The kind that comes after nights where silence pressed against your chest like a weight you didn't think you'd survive. The kind that walks taller, not because it forgets the pain, but because it honors it. You are no longer the version of yourself who begged to be seen, who craved someone's return like it was oxygen, who wrapped your worth around their attention and measured your value by the speed of their replies. That version served its purpose. It showed you what needed to be healed, what parts of you were still looking for validation in someone else's eyes. But that season is over. The waiting is over. What remains now is the truth. They always return, yes, but only when you've finally let go. And not just let go of them, the person, the name, the voice, but let go of the identity you shaped around their presence. Because that's the real work. That's the quiet battle most never talk about. It's not just about deleting their number or resisting the urge to check their profile. It's about unlearning the version of love that told you to shrink, to prove, to perform. It's about reclaiming the pieces of yourself that you gave away without asking if they were treasured. And that's why this journey is sacred, because it isn't linear. It doesn't come with applause or audience. It's messy, it's internal, and yet it's the most profound thing you will ever do. Choosing yourself without needing anyone else to agree. And let's be honest, they may come back, but they won't find what they left. They'll look for the soft, open door and find a solid wall of self-respect. They'll search for the script they used to know, but you've rewritten every line, not out of spite, but out of survival. Not to make them suffer, but to finally stop suffering yourself. Because here's what Stoicism teaches us, that peace is not something you beg for, it is something you build. That love is not earned through sacrifice, it is cultivated through mutual presence and shared effort. And that clarity doesn't come when they explain. It comes when you stop needing their explanation to choose peace. You've become that peace. You've stopped performing closure and started embodying it. You've outgrown the version of you that confused anxiety for affection and silence for mystery. And in doing so, you've stepped into something far greater than reconciliation. You've stepped into freedom. And freedom, once claimed, doesn't go backward. You may still have moments where their memory lingers, where a song or scent pulls you back, but now you recognize those moments for what they are. Remnants, not roots. Memories, not mandates. You are not bound by what was. You are guided by what is becoming, and what is becoming is someone they won't recognize, not because you've changed your hair or your routine, but because you've shifted from needing love to being love, from chasing presence to embodying purpose. And that shift, that's permanent, that's yours. So breathe, stand in it, own it without needing applause. Because this isn't the climax of some romantic movie. It's the quiet revolution of someone who finally realized that love begins not with them, but with you. That peace is not a place you arrive at. It's a posture you choose daily. And that letting go was never the end. It was always the return to yourself, to your fire, to the version of you who doesn't chase, doesn't beg, doesn't perform. The version of you who simply is. And that, in the end, is what they will feel most. Not the loss of your affection, but the loss of your access. And what you will feel as time passes and your steps get lighter is not regret, it's relief. Because you didn't lose them, you liberated yourself. And that's the real glow-up. That's the quiet power of Stoic relationships. That's the story worth telling. And it's only just begun.